We now return to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles 2. I can't believe it's been 6 months since I was last allowed to work in court. Now here I am, back at the Old Bailey. Mr. Naruhodo. Good morning, Professor Hairbrain. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. The atmospheric pressure in here is off the charts. I've never felt anything like this. It's crushing me. I feel it every time I'm here. That gravity. Well, this is Britain's highest court. But are you telling me it's fitted with some kind of device that can actually control air pressure? I think it's probably all in the mind. Yes, well, you won't let me down, will you, Mr. Naruhodo? I'm counting on you in today's trial to save my life, and to save the secret of my super high voltage instantaneous kinesis machine from being made public. Yes, I understand. I know what I have to do. I have to establish that the explosion 2 days ago was nothing more than an unfortunate accident. Well, I'm sure there's nothing to worry about, really. Justice will prevail. My commiserations, Mr. Naruhodo. You appear to have been lumbered with a most tiresome case here. Oh, it's you, Mr. Sholmes. I didn't expect to see you here. That was very mean, Runo, leaving me alone at home with Hurley. Took me at least an hour to wake him. Is it, are you... Herlock Sholmes? Indeed, sir, I am he. Herlock Sholmes. Oh, I've heard all about your exploits, even whilst living in Germany. Yes, Rand's magazine is on sale in Germany too. This month's installment was sublime. Your deduction in the adventure of Silver Blaze was wonderful. Yes, a memorable case indeed. It concerned a snake, I seem to recall. No, that was the speckled band. Well, thank you for coming. I do appreciate your support. I'm sorry to disappoint you, my dear fellow, but I'm afraid I can't stay. Oh? I have urgent business at Madame Dispel's. You mean your waxwork job? No, the waxwork abduction, of course. Madame has engaged my services. So you're trying to get to the bottom of that ransom note, are you? The week's wages depend on it, as does the safe return of the waxwork, naturally. As such, I intend to give it my undivided attention. Oh, well, never mind then. I understand. Of course, with my skills of observation and reasoning, resolving the matter will be as easy as proverbial pie. I shall return forthwith. For until I solve the case, I shall have no money to afford a pie of any description. Oh, then you must absolutely give it your full attention, Hurley. Quite, Iris, quite. But life is riddled with irony, you know. Whenever I give something my full attention, I have a quite insatiable desire for pie. One of the universe's intractable mysteries, you might say. Oh yes, quite. Definitely, absolutely. I totally understand. Is someone a little starstruck? I wish you the very best of luck, Professor Hairbrain. Yeah, why, thank you. Before I depart, Mr. Naruhodo, a word in your ear, if you please. What's this about? As you have remarkably little grounding in science, I feel I ought to inform you. As compelling as this super high voltage instantaneous kinesis hypothesis may be, practical implementation, such as was attempted by the professor at the Great Exhibition, is quite impossible. But the professor said the demonstration was a success. Yes, it would appear that he fervently believes it was. I've read Professor Bunnybrain's paper about it too, Reno, and I have to say, I'm sure it can't be done. It could barely be done theoretically, let alone practically. So he's completely barking up the wrong tree. But how could an experiment that had no possibility of succeeding in fact succeed? It's contradictory. And it's that contradiction that will be at the heart of the trial, I've no doubt. What's that supposed to mean? Now, I must hurry along. I wish you the best of luck, my dear fellow. See you later, Hurley. I don't remember choosing that outfit for her, so she must just change into that alongside Naruhodo, or is that just her thing now? Well, it looks like you're on your own today, Ryuno, but chin up, you can do it. Oh, what about you, Iris? No, I'm afraid I can't help. I have something else I need to do. I see. It's going to be a big surprise for you when you find out what it is. That sounds ominous. Counsel for the defense and the defendant. Court is about to be in session. Make your way to the courtroom at once. We're on our way. Here we go. An experiment that the laws of science say can't possibly succeed, and a scientist who is convinced that it did. That's the riddle you have to unlock here, Ryunosuke. That's the key to this case. Shit. New people! In the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby declare this court to be in session. We are sitting today for the public trial of Professor Albert Hairbrain. I now call upon the counsels for the prosecution and defense to declare their willingness to proceed. The prosecution is ready. The defense is ready, my lord. I'm 6 months out of practice, and what's more, I'm without Susato-san today. Is it just my imagination, or does the air in here feel even more oppressive than usual? So, I must say I recollect the victim of this case all too well. Mr. Odie Asman. Mr. Asman was well known as a financier, although that was merely a front for his diverse criminal activities. It was only a month ago that the man appeared in court prosecuted by you, Lord Van Zieks. But the jury unanimously found him not guilty. Because every member of the jury had been bribed by the sound of it. These powerful London criminals are prepared to go to extreme lengths to keep their freedom. But 2 days ago, on the 21st of October, Mr. Asman met his end. The work of the Reaper, was it? If that is how your lordship would describe divine retribution, but the fact remains that Mr. Asman's death was a direct result of the actions of the accused, Professor Hairbrain. Very well then. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have been selected at random to represent the will of the people. Are the 6 of you ready to fulfill your societal duty? I'm most gratified to have been selected to carry out this important civic duty, my lord. You have a man's fate in the palm of one's hand? Oh gosh, oh golly, it sends shivers down my spine. Science experiments, magic, conjuring tricks, courtroom trials, all are nothing more than performances.
That is spurious, sir. This is where his voice is, because he's got whatever's going on with his mouth right there. Any spurious scholar that defiles the reputation of science deserves to hang.
We have to listen to what's said on both sides of the fence and settle on one. That's it, isn't it? Wasn't like this in my day. I wasn't like this at all. That's the police killer Ottermole look-alike. Again. He's as exhausted as ever, it seems. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, the incident we are here to judge today tragically took place at the Great Exhibition shortly after its opening. But the death toll could have been far worse, with the exception of the victim. No one was killed. Nevertheless, the dream of the science being exhibited rapidly turned into a nightmare for the spectators. A tragic turn of events, and as such the eyes of all London, no, of the whole world, will be on this trial. It is our duty to reach a swift and just conclusion, I feel. So, your opening statement, please, Lord Van Zieks.
At the heart of this incident is technology, never before demonstrated anywhere in the world.
One of science's latest developments, I take it. The government is keen to capitalize on the Great Exhibition to improve Britain's technological advantage.
The technology being demonstrated by the accused was described as super high voltage instantaneous kinesis.
Good lord, what the hell does that mean?
It's designed to disassemble human subjects using extreme high voltage electricity and beam them instantly to another location where they are subsequently reassembled.
Is such a thing even within the realms of possibility?
Well, I don't believe it, that's for sure, and I don't remember your fucking voice I just gave you.
Disassembling people with electricity? My goodness, how shocking.
No, the whole idea is absurd. The hypothesis could never stand up to scrutiny.
Well, sir, I believe you are a fellow of the Royal Society, are you not? An expert in your field?
I am, in my word, in a vacuum, it can be considered final. We're never going to understand what the fucking thing he says. Instantaneous kinesis is poppycock.
So this expert and Mr. Sholmes are in agreement. It's impossible. What is the prosecution's view on the matter?
The prosecution would assert that the accused's instantaneous kinesis demonstration was a success.
What?
What's wrong?
Order! Order!
The professor's hypothesis is currently under investigation by the British government. If it is deemed to have merit, a substantial research grant would be made available. The accused made use of the invention built on his new hypothesis to take Mr. Asman's life, in order to be the sole benefactor of the grant. But this disastrous demonstration was no accident. It was carefully designed from the outset to end the life of the victim.
Thank you, Lord Van Zieks. The prosecution's stance is clear. But you will now bring forth witnesses to substantiate your claims.
Gladly, my lord. Bailiff, show the first witnesses to the stand. Witnesses, state your names and occupations for the court. Yes, sir. Tobias Gregson, Detective Inspector at Scotland Yard's Homicide Division. I was on duty at the demonstration on the day in question and in charge of the following investigation.
Albert Hairbrain, a scientist.
You were born in England, but have been carrying out research in Germany in recent years, correct?
Yes, that's right.
I'm adopting Gregson's voice here.
After graduating from university here in Britain, I went to work in Germany and made an amazing discovery, which is what brought me back. Instantaneous kinesis, as it were. I had to demonstrate my incredible hypothesis of the Great Exhibition.
What you demonstrated was incredible, all right. An incredible explosion.
But the science was a success. The instantaneous kinesis worked. Everyone saw it. They must have done. Yes, there was a terrible accident, but the demonstration of my hypothesis was a success.
Well, that much was undeniable, as shown in this photograph taken by the forensic investigation team.
This was taken inside the Crystal Tower, I take it. The centerpiece of the exhibition, no less.
That's right, my lord. Seems the victim rammed straight into it.
I see. Very well. Submit the photograph as evidence.
Photograph of the victim has been entered into the court record. As of course heard, the victim of the incident was Mr. Odi Asman. Okay, but before that... Nothing? Okay. Nothing else. Fine. There have been a number of allegations made against the man, but putting them aside for the time being, he was a man who financed the research for the experiment and the demonstration itself.
I see. So to summarize the situation, the defendant is accused of taking the life of the man who funded his work. Would that be correct?
Exactly. But couldn't it be that the explosion was caused by some malfunction in the apparatus used for the demonstration?
That's right, it must be. My splendid machine. My poor splendid machine.
You saw it yesterday, didn't you? We can't even examine the wreckage thanks to the Special Dispensation for Scientific Equipment Act.
What? The wreckage? The wreckage? With that being the case, how can the facts be established? How can it possibly be determined whether this was an accident or a deliberate and malicious act?
Extremely simply, my lord.
I beg your pardon?
Isn't that right, witness? Sorry, me? No, your neighbor. Yes, sir, it was murder, plain and simple. Anyone could state that with complete certainty. What? How can you possibly think that?
Thank you, Inspector. I think we'd better proceed to formal testimony. You will explain to the court on what grounds you claim this experiment to have been a front for murder.
I thought we actually just went through the testimony. What the hell is this preamble? The corpse that went crashing through the crystal tower had a broken neck. I made a minor miscalculation in the angle of the beam projection, that's all. That was my mistake. But the post-mortem examination revealed another injury, a fatal wound. As if breaking your neck wasn't fatal. There was a lesion in his chest, where he'd clearly been stabbed by something sharp right in the heart. So the victim was killed before he went anywhere, and this fella's the only one who could have done it.
An extraordinary business. In addition to suffering a broken neck, the victim was stabbed in the heart.
Information I would really like to have heard from someone other than the judge. The coroner says death would have been all but instant from a wound like that. You could say, in fact, that the victim was killed twice by the accused. No, that couldn't be further from the truth. Well, I have here the experiment plan document that was submitted to the security team. Go on. The victim stood himself inside something called the bird cage, ready to be beamed instantly to the second level of the crystal tower, about 25 yards away. The experiment did not go according to plan, however. Thank you for that interlude. As the machine was put into operation, there was a large explosion. The blast caused the beam transmitter to point higher than intended. Accordingly, the kinesis resulted in the birdcage materializing in mid-air, from where it subsequently fell, crashing through the glass of the crystal tower's large round window.
My word. One assumes the victim's neck was broken upon impact with the tower then.
So... I'm already confused now as to who is supposed to be saying that the experiment worked. Because that would seem to imply that the experiment worked.
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen. The machine was just too powerful. But honestly, really, I swear, it was just an accident, a terrible accident.
Unfortunately, that excuse can't save you. No, not considering the sharp murder weapon that pierced the victim's heart.
The murder weapon? What are you saying?
This is the autopsy report submitted by the coroner. The prosecution would like it entered into the court record.
Your request is granted, counsel.
The autopsy report has been entered in the court record. Okay.
I was there in person, you know. I saw the whole ridiculous performance. And the only other person on the stage with Mr. Asman was that disgraceful excuse for a scientist.
Then really, by all accounts, it must have been him.
No, I don't think otherwise. Oh, really? Sure.
Oh, I didn't actually mean to look at this right now, but we can, so I will. Odie Asman, 47. Time of death, 220. Hemorrhage of a wound to the chest that pierced the heart, inflicted by a sharp implement. Additional observations, broken vertebra, most likely resulting from impact after a sudden fall from considerable height. Okay, that doesn't really help me, does it?
The bow and arrow.
Crossbow. The crossbow is what shot him. And the explosion... It must be... Very well. Counsel for the defense. Proceed with the cross-examination, please. Oh, yes, my lord. I need to focus here. It's been a while. I'm kind of interested when I should have brought the costume change in. Like, at what point did the game actually want me to do that? Or is it just an optional thing, like, hey, here you go, and you can use it, and it's like, oh, well, great.
This doesn't fit at all.
Also went crash into a grist hotel at a broken neck.
Hold it!
Go on. Are you suggesting that's because he fell from a considerable height? Exactly, which highlights something else about this whole rum business. What's that? The fact that the instantaneous kinesis itself was a success. After the explosion, the cage with the fella inside suddenly appeared out of nowhere in midair. So although the experiment ended in disaster, the so-called instantaneous kinesis did actually occur. Remind us, Professor, what was the cause of the fatal disaster? Minor miscalculation in the angle of the beam.
Hold it!
So the angle of the projection is critical, is it? And you calculated it yourself, personally? Absolutely. The calculation is far too complicated for anyone but me to carry out. Only you got it wrong, didn't you? Yes, that's right. That's the point. The calculation is so complicated, even I can make a mistake. People fall for that brazen confidence? I should try it. I took into account the subject's height and weight, the wind direction, the ambient temperature. I considered every possible variable, so I just don't understand how this could have happened. Obviously, then, you had to include the weight of the clothes Mr. Asman was wearing at the time, I suppose? Ah. Crackling comets! The answer should have been 3! So much for safety first. The 3 must be for safety third. But the post-mortem examination revealed another injury. Another fatal injury, you say? That doesn't make any sense. I didn't think I'd have to spell this out, but here we go. Just because there were 2 fatal wounds doesn't mean I'm saying the victim had 2 lives to do, does it? Too right. Obviously at first we thought the bloke had died due to his spine snapping in half as well. But you're saying that's not the case? You'll get your answer once I've finished my fish and chips if you don't keep butting in every few seconds. We all know that's a bottomless bag. The victim plummeted 30 feet into a glass tower. It would be reasonable to assume that as the cause of death. Right, that's what we thought. But it was a red herring, wasn't it? There was a lesion in his chest where he'd been stabbed with something sharp. Stabbed. The defense knew nothing of this crucial information. The prosecution received this report from the forensic investigation team only this morning. That was the first we knew of it as well. I can only apologize for the impossibility of informing the defense. Sarcastic and insincere? Thanks. So what was the nature... Did he just try and pull up his armband that is no longer there because of... Why would they take this off this costume? So what was the nature of this sharp object?
Among the accused tools that were in use at the demonstration, one is of particular interest. This.
Ah, yes, that would appear to be some kind of screwdriver, wouldn't it, Counsel?
Ah, there he is. My trusty little companion, Andrew. Andrew, of course. Oh, do you know each other already? He's one of my dear friends, like all my tools. I've named them all, you know. We're one big happy family. Andrew is my flathead screwdriver, of course. His brother Michael is a crosshead.
Well, it would appear that your beloved Andrew has a red stain on his shank.
That isn't... It's blood, beyond all reasonable doubt. No. And that's not all. The long, sharp shape of this Andrew fellow is completely consistent with the victim's wound. What?
Order! Court will enter this friend of the defendant as evidence.
Screwdriver has been entered in the court record. We must take a look at it. So one of Professor Hairbrain's tools is the murder weapon. I can only imagine it's going to fit the crossbow. This is blood. Mr. Asman's, no doubt. This is the problem with looking at murder weapons. I've seen this unusually shaped handle before. It's the same screwdriver that was lodged in the grill of the floor of the kinesis machine, which could be important information, so I should definitely make a note of it. Okay. Great. The victim was killed before he went anywhere. The only fellas in the could have done, man. What grounds do you have for saying that? Do you really need to ask? There were only 2 people on that public experimentation stage in front of the whole crowd. The victim, Mr. Odi Asman, and the accused, Professor Hairbrain. And we know for certain that before the experiment, the victim was alive.
That's right, I saw him with my own eyes. Your voice is just going to be all over the fucking place.
Furthermore, following the explosion and the kinesis, nobody went anywhere near the body. In other words, only someone else on stage with the victim could possibly have done it. Go on.
Excuse me.
Professor Hairbrain, do you have some information that may be relevant here? Professor. Sorry. I was just calculating the optimum coefficient of electrolysis, to separate molecules in the human body. The witness stand is the best place for that. It seemed as though you might have something to say about Inspector Gregson's last remark. Yes, that's right, of course. He just said that nobody else could have done it, didn't he? Yeah, that's right. Who else could have stabbed the victim, eh? I don't know, but there's no way that I could possibly have stabbed Mr. Asman, as you say. Eh? Explain, please, Professor. Of course, this cold-hearted policeman may not be aware, I suppose, but humans are warm-blooded mammals with blood running continuously through their veins. I had heard. Then surely you see, if I'd plunged something the size of Andrew into that man's chest, the whole stage would have been a bloodbath, no a blood swimming pool. Ah, but thousands of Londoners were watching me at the time, and yet not one of them claims to have seen a swimming pool of blood. Well, no, I suppose not. You see, not one.
It's true, I didn't see anything like that.
Well done, Professor. That was a great counter-argument. Order! Pray forgive the discourtesy if I savour a drop from my hallowed chalice to accompany my old friend's adducing. Here's to you, Albert. Oh, you're too kind, Barrack. But I'm really not a patch on you. No, you're not. No. You've neglected to mention one crucial possibility. I have. A particular situation in which very little bleeding would result from a stab wound. Oh, of course. Inspector, enlighten the court, please. Yes, sir. Where are they going with this? Very well. You will amend your formal testimony now, Inspector Gregson. The weapon the victim was stabbed with must have been left in his body whilst he was beamed through the air.
Hold it!
Why would you think that, Inspector? With any wound, it's only when you pull the weapon out that profuse bleeding occurs. Whilst it's still lodged in the body, it acts as a stopper of sorts, for want of a better word. I see. You don't need a medical degree to be aware of this fact. It's common knowledge for any investigator. Where's Sato-san when you need her? If you ask me, this bloke masked what he was doing from view with his body before stabbing Asman in the chest. Then he beamed the victim off the stage with his fancy device. The screwdriver was still where he planted it. I would never do such a thing. Not my precious tools. I would never use them for such dirty work. You only use tools for their intended purpose. That's common knowledge for any scientist, right? Sure you do. The fact remains, the lack of blood at the scene can easily be explained, as the prosecution has demonstrated. Okay. So that's all the testimony I have to work with. I had no idea the victim had been stabbed. That changes everything. Did Van Zieks keep that to himself until now on purpose to gain the advantage? Oh well, I suppose all I can do is press these witnesses for as much new information as possible. I guess. I'm not sure what else we're going to get out of this. I mean... minor miscalculation in the angle of the beam projection.
Hold it!
So the angle of projection is critical, is it? And you calculated yourself personally. Absolutely, calculation for only you got it wrong. Yes, that's right. The point of calculation in your argument. We're going to count height, temperature, wind direction, ambient direction, understand how this could have happened. Obviously, then you had to include the weight of the clothes. Right. After he'd been ostensibly beamed to the tower, it apparently shows a stab wound in his chest. We looked at this.
Hold it!
Well, okay. We're just gonna... So the answer to this is on this one. I don't know how we're supposed to get the clue for this.
Objection!
Surely something about the last statement seems odd, doesn't it?
Okay, to mull over precisely what you find odd about it on your return journey to Japan.
Okay, so no, it's not. What the fuck? Oh, because I've gone down wrong? Oh, I was looking at the right... No, sorry. Okay. I was in the wrong area. It's not what I need, god damn it. The weapon was stabbed. The victim, okay, left in the body whilst he beamed through the air, right. Okay. But we found it in the machine.
Objection!
You say that while the weapon remains in the body, there's very little bleeding. Is that unequivocal? Look, there was no blood on the experimentation stage, even though that's where the fellow was stabbed. The only explanation for that is if the screwdriver was still in his body, stopping any heavy bleeding. It's common medical knowledge, my learned friends, even on your side of the world. Yes. But about the screwdriver. The thing is, we actually saw it at the scene ourselves, on the experimentation stage. What? It was on the floor by the wreckage of the machine, poking through a metal grill. I went to pick it up, but the detective here stopped me. Isn't that right, Inspector Gregson? Yeah, well, now you come to mention it, yeah. Inspector, are we to understand that you permitted the defense counsel to investigate? That you contravened the Special Dispensation for Scientific Equipment Act? Hey, no, not at all. I wouldn't do that. I just let him look, nothing more. I was very clear he wasn't touching a thing. Yes, that's true. This screwdriver was in plain sight on the stage. But it shouldn't have been, should it? What are you getting at? If this tool had still been in the victim's body when the victim was beamed away by the machine, then it shouldn't have still been on the stage. That's right, it should have been beamed across to the Crystal Tower along with Mr. Asman, and been found still lodged in the victim's chest.
What, how do you explain this, Inspector?
I don't. It looks as though everything that the victim had on his person moved with him when he was beamed. If the screwdriver was still in his chest when the instantaneous kinesis occurred, obviously that should have been beamed to the destination as well. This is a strange situation. Even though people are saying that this instantaneous kinesis is a scientific possibility, we're still basing arguments on the assumption that it did actually take place. Alright. Time to tighten the screws here. My lord, if the prosecution is unable to explain this inconsistency in its argument, we can only conclude the testimony given in support cannot be relied upon. Lord Banzeeks is stumped.
You have something to say, witness?
Yes, I knew it. It bears out. The equations hold. Mr. Naruhodo, don't worry. About what? Without delving into the details, there is no inconsistency. What? Even if Andrew had been lodged in Mr. Asman's chest, my trusty tool wouldn't have moved. Andrew remaining on the stage is consistent with my calculations. What? Oh. It would seem your illusions have been shattered. Clearly we should hear the accused's explanation. Or should I say, this brilliant scientist's explanation. Just when I'd found an inconsistency in the prosecution's argument, they pulled me back in. Scientists.
Very well, the defendant will testify again. Provide us with the scientific explanation as to why the inconsistency asserted by the defense fails to hold.
In the name of Apollo, I will, my lord.
To be clear, I'm still at the stage of gathering data in my research. My hypothesis states the kinesis cannot transport metal, though, hence the metal weapon would have stayed put. In other words, the point just raised by Mr. Naruhodo isn't any inconsistency at all. Mr. Asman was the patron of my research. Without him, my work wouldn't have been possible. Now I have a duty to protect the incredible machine that we put together. So the thrust of your testimony, Professor, is
That based upon his hypothesis, metal objects cannot be moved by this method of instantaneous kinesis.
in other words,
In other words, since the screwdriver is made of metal, even if it's remained lodged in the victim's chest, its subsequent discovery on the stage, despite the victim being found elsewhere, is not an inconsistency.
and therefore,
The Professor Albert Hairbrain could still have been the killer.
my great hypothesis holds, you see. We had to make the cage used to contain the subject from wood for that very reason. I was not addressing you, witness.
Professor Hairbrain,
Yes,
whose side are you on here?
I don't take sides, Mr. Naruhodo. No. My only interest lies in upholding my hypothesis. I'm a scientist, after all.
Right. Is he working for us or against us? It's very hard to tell. Let's see how you cross-examine this testimony, my Nipponese friend.
Yes, fire away, Mr. Naruhodo.
The inconsistency.
To be clear, I'm still in the stage of gathering data.
Right.
And yet your retort to my argument wasn't lacking in confidence in any way. No scientist can find the truth without first finding self-belief. Those were the words of a certain scientist I hold in the very highest esteem.
But you realize that disproving my argument puts you in a very precarious position, don't you?
No scientist should strive to protect himself more than he strives to protect the truth. More words of the same great scientist, you know?
Words that are causing me a lot of trouble. Who is this scientist?
I'm afraid I couldn't tell you, Mr. Naruhodo. But as soon as I remember the magnificent genius's name, you'll be the first to know.
It might be worth keeping the names of your idols to mind. You're wasting your breath, my learned friend. This scatterbrain even forgets my name at times. The Lord Van Zeeks really did have a friend once, but I didn't notice hell freezing over.
My hypothesis states that kinesis cannot transport metal.
Hold it!
Your hypothesis states it, so this isn't proven then.
No, of course not. It's merely a hypothesis, but a good one, based upon thousands of calculations. But it is widely known that metals can't be decomposed by electrolysis. Yes, of course. So I am right. My hypothesis is clearly correct.
What is it about incriminating himself that makes this man so happy?
It's the whole reason the birdcage is made of wood, you see.
Sorry, the birdcage?
Yes, that's what I call the C. obtusus cage in which Mr. Asman was placed for the kinesis. The jail cell in which the victim was detained. It does indeed seem to be made of a timber of sort. I'll thank you not to refer to it as an instrument of incarceration, your lordship. In short, any weapon lodged in the victim when he was beamed away by instantaneous kinesis would have been left behind on the stage if it is made of metal, correct? Yes, that's it. Yes. It all fits perfectly with the mathematical model. And the ultimate conclusion, then, is that the defendant alone had the opportunity to inflict this fatal injury on the victim, is it not? Ah, indeed, sir. Someone beam me out of this nightmare. In other words, the point just raised by Mr. Naruhodo isn't an inconsistency at all. You seem to be pleased by that. Yes, another example of my hypothesis holding true. But I sense some sarcasm, Mr. Naruhodo. Are you not pleased? No. I knew it. At the end of the day, I'm the one responsible for Mr. Asman losing his life. The advancement of science is no excuse, I know that. No, you're quite right. Tell the court, did you have a close relationship with Mr. Asman? Oh, well, no, not really. I mean, I'd only met him 2 or 3 times. And we only ever discussed my hypothesis and the project, and the research grant, of course. Mr. Asman was a patron of the research.
Hold it!
How did you come to know Mr. Asman in the first place? A year ago now, a small provincial science journal very funny. Provincial science journal published a little paper about my book. About my work. That's a scientific journal, good gracious. I should need new spectacles. I might have had an extraordinary hypothesis and great promise, but at the time I had no money. I had to eat tiny little meals at a tiny little cafe and drink watered-down water out of a tiny little glass. Yeah, but Mr. Asman read the paper and came to visit me at my tiny little laboratory. And offered you money to help fund your work. Exactly, that's exactly what happened. I handled the theoretical side of things, and Mr. Asman provided me with an engineer for the practical. And the 3 of us produced that fantastic machine together.
Suspicious that there's a third person involved.
The machine that you brought to the Great Exhibition to demonstrate. We had to apply it to the government for some sort of inspection to be allowed to exhibit, I think. I didn't understand all that side of things. Mr. Asman took care of all of it. He was a wonderful man, really. I owe him everything. Sure. Now I have a duty to protect the incredible machine we built together. When you say you built the machine together, does that mean that you were involved in its construction? Yes. Well, not exactly. I'm not good with the practical side of machines myself, so the physical construction was done by an engineer.
Little remains of your creation now, though, following the explosion. Repair will no doubt be impossible.
Yes, I realize that, but still. If someone were to gather all the broken parts, they could discover the secret of my hypothesis. But Mr. Asman and I toiled over that machine for so long, we put our hearts and soul into it. I have to protect our work. So what's left of the machine must be kept safe. That's only fair, because what happened was an accident.
That's the extent of the testimony, then. Thank goodness for that. I don't want him doing any more damage. He's already basically proven he could have been the culprit. But it seems as though all he really cares about is defending his hypothesis. Still, I wonder, what if his hypothesis is just fundamentally flawed? The game, in fact, showed us the clue that this might be true. By showing us this picture.
Objection!
Professor Hairbrain, you say that according to your hypothesis, nothing made of metal can be beamed by instantaneous kinesis using the machine you made. Is that right? Yes, that's right. Spot on. Exactly correct. In that case, I'd ask you to have a look at this photograph that was taken at the scene. In particular, I'd like you to pay attention to the victim's face. You can clearly see that Mr. Asman is wearing a pair of spectacles with a metal rim. What? Metal? No! Metal can't... That's not... metal. No! We've already established that the proposed murder weapon, the screwdriver, was found on the stage. However, if your hypothesis correctly predicted that outcome, it should also have predicted that the metal-rimmed spectacles would be found in the same place. My hypothesis! Professor Hairbrain, this isn't easy for me to say, but your hypothesis is clearly flawed. What happened to the inspector? Order! Counsel, what is the implication of this? If, on the day in question, the alleged instantaneous kinesis never actually took place, then it's entirely possible the victim was killed somewhere other than on stage. And, in that case, someone other than the defendant could have been the culprit. But my hypothesis was sound. I proved it that day. The experiment was a success. The experiment was proof of all my work.
If I could say something here, I don't know, could you? In my capacity as a Fellow of the Royal Society?
Yes, Juror number 4. Go ahead, if you must. If I must try and do this fucking voice that I chose. Again.
As a matter of science, there's one thing I simply cannot abide. And that's a fraud who pretends to be a fellow man of science.
What? Great Scott! Are you suggesting my science is suspect?
It's just been disproved, hasn't it? In front of all of us. In other words, the whole demonstration was a complete nonsense from start to finish. Believe me, my fellow jurors, when I tell you that this man is a heel, a bounder, and a fraud. I say the wreckage of this machine should be stripped down and thoroughly examined. I don't remember your voice. It changes. It's going to change.
No, never. That machine is the essence of my entire hypothesis. It's protected by the Special Dispensation of Scientific Equipment Act. There is so much goddamn repetition of fucking long names.
What the devil is that blasted act all about, eh? Who made up such a daft rule?
It's definitely not the first voice I gave you. I don't like the way this seems to be going. What's the best way for me to help the professor? Probably raise an objection.
Objection!
Professor Hairbrain has yet to perfect his invention. That would seem to be the case, yes. But even so what? Going to such trouble and expense to create a fake machine to display in public, he would have absolutely no reason to do such a thing. He had an obvious reason to do exactly that. It was a research grant money.
If the government was foolish enough to have deemed the man's ridiculous notion plausible, he and his conspirators would have received a handsome sum indeed.
Conspirators? What would be the value of such a grant? £10?
You're an order of magnitude out, madam. £500 a year.
Or, you can leave answerable that much for years. For years. You can leave, oh god, I can't do a West Country accent, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to see that one.
The Society's noticed an increase in bogus public demonstrations in the field of science recently. And plenty of scientists argue with each other to get the largest slice of their funding cake. People's greed is plenty motive enough for murder, I assure you.
No, I haven't deceived anyone, least of all the government. My hypothesis is sound, the science is sound. Please, you must believe me. No matter how unbelievable this hypothesis may seem to you, ladies and gentlemen, the fact remains that the victim was transported instantly to the Crystal Tower. Which means that the experiment was a success. Beric. And therefore, the only person who could possibly have committed this murder is the accused. Beric. Where is this heading? I have no idea. My lord, if I may. Yes, Lord Van Zieks. The prosecution would like to summon new witnesses to the stand. New witnesses? What would be the nature of their involvement?
They were spectators of the demonstration at the exhibition, who were occupying special seats. Eyewitnesses. More voices.
Very well, the court grants the prosecution's request. I should very much like to hear from eyewitnesses to the incident.
The prosecution's stance is clear. This experiment was no postiche. The accused killed the financier victim there on the public stage before the very eyes of the spectators. Now, my learned friends. Oh, yes? It's time for you to make your own stance clear. There's clearly a flaw in the professor's hypothesis. I can definitely see that. But where does that leave me?
We shall take a short recess now, during which time the prosecution will prepare its new witnesses to take the stand.
As you wish, my lord.
Good. In that case, court is adjourned for 20 minutes.
It'll give me plenty of time to look ahead at the new witnesses so I can maybe come up with a voice for them ahead of time. Talking like a farmer. There's what is it? Just do potatoes. I could do that. I could try doing that. Mr. Frodo. And shit, I already did that. I don't need to do that one again. Okay. I'll see you next time.